Voting registration in Florida was extended until 7 p.m. Eastern last night after the online system crashed for all users. According to the Florida Secretary of State, Laura Lee, there were over 1 million registration requests just hours before the site closed. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis had this to say during a press conference yesterday.
They're investigating some of the issues as kind of what led to it, but it was an inordinate amount of traffic. So that'll be live, but you also have ability to do this, and you also will be able to postmark a registration today. That will be accepted if it's postmarked today. So providing as many opportunities as possible, and also providing the similar time frame from when we were experiencing the difficulties yesterday.
Registration has officially closed as of yesterday, but any forms dropped off in person or postmarked for October 6th will be accepted by the state. So with more on this, we want to bring in Jim DeFede. He's an investigative reporter from our Miami station. Jim, thanks a lot for joining us. Considering the times and all the meddling we have covered before when it comes to, online attacks, I have to ask you outright, does this appear to be a deliberate attack?
That's a good starting point to begin with, and I think a lot of people wondered whether or not this was the Russians or the Chinese or someone invariably trying to interfere and cause chaos. Right now, all of the investigators that I'm familiar with have said that that is not the case. And there may be actually a more simple explanation. Ariana Grande, the pop superstar, tweeted out to her 77 million followers basically at 3 p.m. on Monday that it was important for fellow Floridians to register to vote because it could sway the election, and today was the last day. And following her tweet to her 77 million followers, the system began getting an inordinate number of requests for ballots, crashing the system. This then led to reporters and activists and politicians checking to see if the system was down, which further added to it. So then Ariana Grande tweeted out as well, it looks like voter suppression in Florida, and called on Governor DeSantis to extend the voting. So was it the Russians? Or was it Ariana Grande, or some combination of the two? More than likely, what's really at play here is that the state of Florida has bad computer systems. We saw it with the Florida unemployment system. It was described as a jalopy. But now we may have also a problem with the voter registration computer system not being able to handle its servers this sort of an influx, upwards of 1 million people in an hour trying to get onto the system. I don't know if I can blame the state entirely for that, because who would have ever expected Ariana Grande to suddenly demand everyone go register and vote at the last minute?
Jim, I love the juxtaposition. Was it the Russians or Ariana Grande? In 2020, it's anybody's guess. But let me ask you, why did the shutdown prompt then some lawsuits from voting rights groups?
Because the state of Florida does not get the benefit of the doubt on these things, nor should they. There is a history, as I mentioned, with the questions surrounding the unemployment site, which continued to not only fail, but we since learned that it was designed to fail. It was designed to turn away people from being able to apply for unemployment. That was a system created under the Rick Scott administration that Governor DeSantis has specifically said was created to distract people or to keep people from registering to sign up for unemployment benefits. So given that history, people were concerned. Now, a number of groups came forward and have filed a lawsuit, and those lawsuits are continuing. What the governor did yesterday was reopen online registration from noon to 7 p.m. Essentially, he believes that they lost about 7 hours of online voting on Monday, basically from 5 p.m. to midnight. So he made that up by saying, all right, from noon to 7, we'll give you 7 hours of online registration ability and the ability to go in person or to postmark. That's still not good enough for a number of Democratic groups and activist groups who are continuing to go to court saying we need more, at least another 48 hours of online registration. We'll see what the judges end up saying about this, but it's Florida and it's 2020 and there's always going to be a mess.
Yeah, so my question was going to be, did the extension give people enough time to register?
Well, that is a good point. That's the question, indeed. Whether or not that's 7 hours, and it seems kind of arbitrary, noon to 7 p.m. Why not just make it from noon to midnight, just like every other day was midnight was the deadline on Monday. But for some reason, the governor just decided to do the bare minimum, which he thought was noon to 7 online. Exactly.
So do these numbers at all tell us how Floridians are feeling and preparing for the election? It does look like some of the numbers indicate that Vice President Biden is doing better than he was earlier in the race.
So a couple of things here. Overall registration, when you look at the total number of people registering, Republicans feel that they did very good in signing up new Republican voters over the past 6 months to a year. Democrats did not do as well as they may have hoped or expected to. But one thing that we're actually seeing, and remember, the election isn't 28 days away. The election is today. The election was yesterday in Florida. The election has been going on in Florida. Nearly 1 million people in Florida have already voted by mail, and we haven't even opened up our early voting sites yet. So of the 1 million people that have voted, the vast majority have been Democrats. So Democrats lead in the early stages of vote by mail by about a 200,000 or 300,000 vote lead advantage. Now, you don't know if every Democrat is voting for Joe Biden. You don't know if every Republican is voting for Donald Trump. But it's that level of excitement. Now, I would caution you that Republicans tend to vote on Election Day, and Democrats have turned more and more to vote by mail in recent years, but particularly this year. And in speaking to election officials across the state, they anticipate that by the time the election day happens, 75 to 80% of the vote will already have been collected either through vote by mail or early voting sites. So there's only going to be about 20% of the electorate that will turn out on election day.
So now I want to talk to you about the voting rights of the formerly incarcerated. Former New York City Mayor Mike Bloomberg raised $16 million to help pay the fines of these former prisoners because they were not able, obviously when you're incarcerated you can't vote, but part of the problem was once they got out they had to pay their fines in order to have the ability to vote. So that's what that money's all about. It's an awful lot of people. Is it enough to actually, I don't know, shift things a little bit in Florida?
Well, if the original intent of the amendment, you're talking about Amendment 4 that was passed a couple of years ago, where the folks would have automatically become eligible to vote, you wouldn't have had to go through a process, I think it might have made an impact. The attempts by Michael Bloomberg and others, I think even LeBron James has contributed money into a fund to help the formerly incarcerated, as you described, pay off fines and fees. The problem that I'm hearing from folks is that is not as easy a process as you would imagine. One of the problems in the state of Florida, and again, it goes to the problems that they have with being able to process this type of information, is there is no central repository to tell someone, here's how much you owe. So in other words, if I was recently incarcerated and was released, I don't necessarily know the exact precise amount that I owe in fees and fines. And if I was released 10 years ago, I don't know what that number is. There's no central place I can go in Florida and say, please tell me how much fees and fines I need to pay before I can register to vote. Now, there was an interesting analysis done by a group of Florida newspapers that came out today that suggested about 31,400 former convicted, former incarcerated folks who have come out have registered in the since basically Amendment 4. Now, of those, it's not clear how many are now able to vote because a lot of people signed up, many of those 31,000 signed up when they thought they didn't have to pay their fees and fines. So we're not clear as to how many of those folks will actually be eligible or not. Again, it's a chaotic situation. That was the intent, really, of trying to challenge. It was the Republicans in the legislature and others who tried to defy the will of the people. That Amendment 4 passed with well over 60% of the vote, and yet they've been trying to claw away at it ever since. They've delayed it through the court system. They've created confusion. This will eventually wind up at the U.S. Supreme Court, but it's not going to take place before this year's election, obviously.
So much good information and reporting. Jim DeFede, as always, my friend, thank you very, very much. Really informative. We appreciate it.